We've been talking about arguments. Remember, an argument is a collection of statements, some of which are intended to provide support or evidence for one of the others. Some arguments are good, other arguments are bad. I want to talk right now about one good feature of an argument. This feature isn't enough to make an argument good by itself, but it's one thing that's needed for an argument to be good. One thing that can be good about an argument. This is when an argument has a good structure. When an argument's got a good structure, we say it's a valid argument. An argument is valid if and only if it has a form that would make it impossible for the premises to be true and the conclusion to be false. Putting it that way is kind of a mouthful, but the rough idea is this. Suppose you've got an argument. Suppose the argument's got a certain kind of structure. Because of that structure, if the premises are true, then the conclusion's got to be true as well. In that case, it's a valid argument. There's an intuitive test we can use to figure out whether or not an argument's valid. The first thing we do is we imagine that the premises are true, even if they're not. So again, we're not thinking about whether the premises are true. That's just a different good feature of the argument. That's not the good feature we're talking about now. You imagine that the premises are true, even if you know they're not. Then, after you've imagined that the premises are true, you ask yourself, forgetting about everything else but just your understanding that the premises are true. All other knowledge you have is tossed out. Just imagining the premises are true. Can you still imagine the conclusion being false? If after you've done that, if after you've imagined the premises are true, you can still imagine the conclusion being false, then the argument is not valid. It has a bad structure. But if you can't, if after you've imagined the premises being true, you can't imagine the conclusion being false, then the argument's is valid and has a good structure in this sense. And so again, I want to emphasize the validity of an argument doesn't have anything to do with whether the premises are true or false. That's not what it's about. A valid argument can have false premises and a false conclusion. It's about the relationship between the premises and the conclusion. Whether because of the structure of the argument, if the premises are true, then the conclusion's got to be true. Here's a few examples to illustrate. Let's go back to our sample examples. All governors are rich. That's the first premise. Bieber is a governor, so Bieber is rich. Even though one of the premises is false, even though Bieber's not a governor, the argument is valid. If 1 and 2 are true, 3's got to be true. Here's a way to think about it. Imagine that every single governor is rich. Every single one. Imagine that Bieber is one of those rich governors. Then he's got to be rich. We said every single governor is rich. We said Bieber's a governor, so Bieber's got to be rich. It's valid. Now let's consider another sample argument. Some governors are rich. Polis is a governor, so Polis is rich. This argument is not valid. We can tell a story where 1 is true and 2 is true, but 3 is false. And here's an example of such a story. Imagine there are 49 governors who are rich and 1 governor who gives all of his money to the poor. And imagine that Polis is the 1 governor who gives all of his money to the poor. Then 1 is true. Some governors are rich, because we said 49 governors are rich, and that's enough to make 1 true. 2 is true. Polis is a governor. But he's the 1 poor governor who gives all of his money away. So 3 is false. We can tell a story where 1 and 2 are true, but 3 is false. And so it's not a valid argument. Now let's consider our third sample argument. All governors are rich. Polis is a governor, so Polis is rich. Notice that this has the same structure as the first sample argument we talked about, the Bieber argument. The only difference between the 2 arguments is you've got Polis here in this one, and you have Bieber here in this one. And this argument, just like the Bieber argument, is valid. And what that shows us is that validity is all about the structure of the argument and not about the content. Doesn't matter if it's about governors, doesn't matter if it's about Polis or Bieber, whatever. What matters is the structure of the argument. The Bieber argument is valid. This has the same structure as the Bieber argument, so this is valid too.